I pulled into the Kroger parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Nothing on my mind except picking up coffee and maybe a rotisserie chicken for dinner. I was 63 years old, recently retired from 31 years with the county assessor's office, and that was the kind of man I had become. A man who thought about rotisserie chicken on Tuesday afternoons. That's when I saw him, my son, standing near the cart return, wearing a jacket I recognized, the Carhartt I'd given him 2 Christmases ago, holding a cardboard sign. I didn't read the sign. I didn't need to. I just sat there in my truck with the engine running, staring through the windshield at my 34-year-old son who had a master's degree in civil engineering, standing in a parking lot asking strangers for money. I pulled into a space. I turned off the engine. I sat there for another full minute because I genuinely did not know what to do with what I was seeing. His name is Lionel, my only son. I got out of the truck. He saw me before I reached him, and the look on his face. That's something I'll carry with me until I die. It wasn't embarrassment exactly. It was something worse. It was relief and shame mixed together, and underneath all of it, something that looked like it had been broken for a very long time and had finally just given up trying to hide it. "Dad," he said. I didn't say anything. I just put my arms around him. He was thinner than I remembered. He smelled like someone who had been sleeping in his car. Because, as I would find out in the next hour, that is exactly what he had been doing. We sat in my truck. I kept the heat running. He told me everything, or as much as he could get through before his voice gave out. His wife. They had been married 4 years, had cleaned out their joint accounts 8 weeks earlier. Not just their checking. Their savings, the investment account they had been building together, the emergency fund, all of it. She had done it on a Friday afternoon while he was on a job site outside Columbus, and by the time he drove home that evening, she was gone. She and her mother, who had been living with them for the past year, had packed up everything of value in the house and left. The house itself was in foreclosure. He hadn't known that either. The mortgage payments had been going out of the account she controlled. She had gradually, over about 18 months, convinced him to let her manage their finances because she said he was too busy with work. And for months, those payments had not been made. The bank had been sending notices to an email address he didn't have access to. He had come home to an empty house, a notice on the door, and a bank account with $47 in it. I asked him where his daughter was. He looked at me, and the look on his face broke something in me. "She took Nora," he said. "She took her to her mother's place in Georgia. I don't know the exact address. She won't answer my calls. My granddaughter, 18 months old. I had seen her 3 weeks before at a Sunday dinner. She had sat on my lap and pulled at my collar and laughed at everything. I drove us both back to my house that night. I made him eat. I made him shower. I set him up in his old room. And then I sat at my kitchen table alone at 11:30 at night. And I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be for the next chapter of whatever this was. I want to back up. Because the story doesn't start in that parking lot. It starts about 3.5 years before, and there are things I should have seen. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. My son met his wife. I'll call her by her name, Claudette, at a professional networking event in downtown Cleveland. He was 29, she was 26. She was attractive and sharp, and she laughed at everything he said, and she had a way of making him feel, as he described it to me once, like the most interesting person in any room. I understand that feeling. His mother had made me feel that way too, once. His mother passed when Lionel was 17, and I think I've thought about this a lot. That Lionel spent a long time afterward being very hungry for that feeling. Claudette came into his life fast and moved through it faster. Within 6 months, they were living together. Within a year, engaged. I had reservations. Not strong ones. Nothing I could point to and say, this is wrong, just a general unease. She was charming in the way that certain people are charming, completely, consistently, without gaps. There was never a moment when she was just a regular person being tired or irritable or ordinary. Everything was performance, and I suppose I told myself that was just her personality. Her mother, Rosamond, moved in with them about 8 months after the wedding. The official reason was that Rosamond had been having health problems and needed help. Lionel told me about it apologetically, like he was bracing for me to be upset, and I told him it was his home and his decision. I said it because I meant it, and also because I was trying to respect his life. What I should have done was ask more questions. A lot more questions. Rosamond was a piece of work that I did not fully appreciate until it was too late. She was 61, sharp-eyed, and she had a talent for making herself indispensable. She cooked, she cleaned, she watched the baby after Nora arrived. She was always there, always helpful, and she and Claudette together created an atmosphere in that house that Lionel, over time, came to accept as normal. He worked long hours. He came home to a house that ran smoothly. He didn't ask a lot of questions because the answers, on the surface, all seemed fine. I understand how that happens. I was married for 22 years. When someone you trust tells you everything is fine, you believe them, because the alternative is a kind of suspicion that feels like a betrayal of the relationship itself. What Claudette and Rosamond had done, and this came out later through lawyers and forensic accountants and a lot of painful documentation, was methodical. It had started almost immediately after Nora was born. The financial management conversation, the "you're so busy, let me take this off your plate" conversation. The gradual consolidation of access. The new email account, set up in Lionel's name but controlled by Claudette, redirected for all financial correspondence. The slow, careful siphoning that looked, in any individual month, like normal household spending. The mortgage payments that stopped being made without his knowledge. The life insurance policy she'd encouraged him to take out, naming her as sole beneficiary, signed the week after Nora was born when Lionel was running on no sleep and pure relief that everyone was healthy. I want to stop here because I know some of you are thinking about that life insurance policy. I thought about it too. I thought about it a great deal. My son is alive, and he is sitting across from me as I tell you this story. But I spent a significant number of nights in the months after that parking lot, not sleeping, thinking about what that policy represented. A husband, exhausted, in love, trusting. A document that benefited no one but her. A pattern of behavior that, once you saw it, you could not unsee. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years in county government. I know how paperwork works and I know how people use it. I am not a lawyer. But I know when something looks designed. The morning after I brought Lionel home, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a family law attorney named Aldous Ferreira, who had been recommended to me years ago by a colleague and whose card I had kept in my desk drawer for no particular reason. Sometimes you keep things. I called him at 8 in the morning and he called me back within the hour. The second call was to a private investigator, a woman named Sparrow. That is actually her name. She told me her parents were optimistic people who had been in business for 11 years and who, on the phone, asked exactly the right questions and did not waste a single word. Aldous told me the first priority was Nora. Everything else, the money, the house, the accounts, was secondary. His exact words were, "We can rebuild finances. We cannot get back time with a child." He filed for emergency custody proceedings that week, based on the fact that Claudette had relocated the child across state lines without the other parent's consent, which in Ohio is treated with a particular seriousness. I did not know that before. I know it now. Sparrow found Rosamond's address in Savannah, Georgia, within 4 days. She is very good at her job. What followed was 3 months of the hardest work I have ever done in my life. And I say that as a man who once processed 1,700 property reassessments in a single quarter, legal proceedings do not move fast. Family court moves even slower than other courts. There were hearings and continuances and documents that had to be gathered and verified and filed. Aldous needed bank records going back 3 years. He needed the original mortgage documentation. He needed the email forwarding records, which required a subpoena. He needed, eventually, a forensic accountant named Preston who charged more per hour than I want to admit, but who produced a 40-page report that laid out, in language a judge could follow, exactly what had happened to my son's money. The total was $214,000. That's what they had taken over the course of approximately 20 months. Some of it was direct transfers. Some of it was purchases, furniture, jewelry, a used car titled in Rosamond's name, made using accounts Claudette controlled. Some of it was the mortgage money that had never been paid. During those 3 months, Lionel lived in my house. He went back to work. His company had held his position because he had told them there was a family emergency and they were decent people about it. He woke up at 5:30 every morning. He went to work. He came home. He ate dinner. He called Nora on a video call schedule that had been established through the court. 2 calls per week, 30 minutes each, supervised by a guardian ad litem the court had appointed. Nora was too little to understand what was happening. She would hold things up to the camera, a stuffed rabbit, a plastic cup, and he would say, "I see it, baby, I see it," and I would sit at the kitchen table and drink my coffee and look at the wall. I am telling you this because I want you to understand what that kind of thing costs, not the legal bills, the other cost, the one that doesn't have a number. There was a night, it was a Wednesday in January, about 6 weeks into the legal process, when I woke up at 2 in the morning and I heard him in the living room, just sitting there in the dark. I went out and sat with him. We didn't talk for a long time. Finally, he said, "Dad, did I miss something? Was there something I should have seen?" I told him the truth, which is that smart, careful people get deceived by other smart, careful people every single day, and that what happened to him was not a failure of his intelligence or his character. It was a failure of her character. That is where the failure lives. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "I just want to bring Nora home." "I know," I said. "We're working on it." The custody hearing was in February. Claudette appeared with an attorney and a version of events that I will charitably describe as creative. She claimed Lionel had been emotionally absent, financially irresponsible, and that she had relocated to Georgia for Nora's safety. Her attorney was polished and aggressive and clearly experienced. Aldous is also experienced. He had Preston's 40-page report. He had the subpoenaed email records. He had the bank transfer documentation, date by date, amount by amount, going back 20 months. He had Sparrow's report on the Georgia property, which showed that Rosamond had purchased a significant amount of furniture and 2 pieces of jewelry in the weeks immediately following the account liquidation. He also had something I had not expected: 3 former neighbors, people who had lived near Lionel and Claudette's house, who had observed things over the past couple of years that they were willing to put into sworn statements. Small things, individually. Together they drew a picture. The judge was a woman in her late 50s named the Honorable Frances Odom. She had a reputation, all this told me, for cutting through what she called manufactured distress in custody cases. She was not unkind, but she was precise. Her ruling came 3 weeks after the hearing: primary custody to Lionel, structured visitation for Claudette, supervised initially to be reassessed at 6 months, immediate return of the child to Ohio within 10 days. I was in the courthouse hallway when Aldous called me with the ruling. I had not been able to sit in the courtroom. Too much anxiety, too much wanting to say things I should not say, and I was standing by a window that looked out over a gray February parking lot. I held the phone and I didn't say anything for a moment. "She's coming home," Aldous said. I said, "Thank you." It was insufficient. I don't have a better word. The criminal side took longer. The financial fraud case was referred to the county prosecutor's office, and then, because of the interstate elements, there was involvement from federal authorities as well. I'm not going to give you a law school lecture about the jurisdictional details because, frankly, Aldous had to explain them to me 3 times before I fully understood them. What I can tell you is that by May, Claudette had been charged with wire fraud, identity theft, the redirected email account counted, and felony theft. Rosamond was charged as a co-conspirator. Claudette's attorney negotiated. They always negotiate. She pled guilty to reduced charges and received 36 months, with credit for time served during proceedings. Rosamond, who cooperated with prosecutors, received 18 months probation and restitution requirements. I want to be honest with you about how I felt when I heard those sentences. I felt they were not enough. I still feel they were not enough. I am 63 years old, and I have tried my whole life to be a fair-minded person, and I am telling you honestly that sitting in that parking lot watching her walk away, even with a conviction, even with time to serve, felt insufficient. Some things don't resolve cleanly. I want you to know I understand that. What I held on to was this: Nora came home. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 10 days after the custody ruling, brought to the Ohio state line by a court-appointed transport. That's a thing that exists. I didn't know it existed before this. And Lionel drove down to meet them. I stayed home. That moment belonged to him, not to me. I had dinner ready when they got back. Something simple. Pasta and salad and bread, because it was all I knew how to do with my hands that afternoon. I heard the front door open. I heard his voice, and then I heard a sound I recognized. Nora laughing. She came around the corner into the kitchen, unsteady on her feet the way toddlers are, wearing a little fleece jacket with bears on it that I had never seen before, and she looked at me with complete confidence, like there was nothing strange about any of it, and she said, "Pa," which is what she calls me, and held up both arms. I picked her up. She grabbed my collar. She laughed at something only she could see. I had to excuse myself for a minute after that. I told them I needed to check something in the backyard. I stood on my back deck in the cold for about 2 minutes and got myself together. Then I went back inside and served dinner. That was 8 months ago. Lionel is still living with me, though he's been looking at apartments. He got a significant raise in April. A promotion, actually, to senior project manager, which his company offered him unprompted. Nora is in a daycare 3 mornings a week that she appears to enjoy enormously, based on the volume of art projects she brings home. She is 2 years old. She likes trucks and dogs and anything involving water. The restitution process has returned approximately 60% of the money so far. The house is gone. Lionel accepted that early on, and I think accepting it was what allowed him to move forward. Aldous told us the restitution collection could continue for years, that the judgments don't disappear. We'll see. I have been asked by various people in my life whether I blame myself for not seeing it sooner. My brother asked me that directly at Easter. He meant well. I told him what I actually think, which is that the question is not useful. What's useful is what you do once you see it. You make the calls. You show up. You sit in the courthouse hallway by the window when you're too anxious to sit in the courtroom. You have dinner ready when they come home. My son asked me once, during those long winter months, why I was doing all of it. The money, the time, the calls, the research, all of it. I told him I didn't have a good answer. I told him it wasn't even something I thought about. He's my son. Nora is my granddaughter. There was never a moment when it was a question. He said, "You didn't have to fight this hard, Dad." I told him I didn't fight at all. I just refused to stop moving forward. I think that's the only thing I actually know how to do. I want to say one more thing before I'm done, and it's about the power of attorney. There was a PLA, Lionel had signed one, giving Claudette authority to handle financial matters. What I learned through this process is something I want you to hear clearly, because the question comes up. Yes, a power of attorney can be revoked. It can be revoked by the person who granted it in writing at any time, as long as that person has legal capacity. The problem in Lionel's case was that he didn't know what he had signed. Or rather, he had signed it in a moment of trust and hadn't revisited it. The lesson is not to never trust anyone. The lesson is to know what you've signed, to keep a copy, and to know that you can take it back. I am not a lawyer. Please consult one, but know that you have more power than you think. If something in your life looks wrong to you, if something doesn't add up, if the person you trusted is giving you answers that almost make sense but not quite, trust that feeling. Don't wait for proof. Start asking questions. The questions themselves are a form of protection. I saw my son in a parking lot holding a cardboard sign. I drove home that night not knowing what was going to happen. I made 2 phone calls the next morning. That's all I knew to do. It turned out to be enough. Where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. I've had 8 months now to sit with everything that happened, not to get over it. I don't think that's the right way to put it, but to actually look at it clearly, the way you can only do once the emergency is over and the adrenaline is gone and it's just you and your kitchen and the sound of a 2-year-old in the next room. Here's what I keep coming back to. What Claudette and Rosamond didn't happen in a day. It took them the better part of 2 years. Patient, careful, methodical. That's not impulsive behavior. That's a choice made over and over every time they moved money. Every time they redirected a letter, every time they looked my son in the face and told him everything was fine. Each of those moments was a small decision, and small decisions, stacked on top of each other long enough, become the entire shape of a person's life. Theirs and the lives of everyone around them. That's the thing about choices. They don't announce themselves as the ones that matter. They just feel like ordinary days. What I've tried to teach Lionel, what I hope he takes from this, is that intelligence alone is not enough to protect you. My son is a smart man. He has an advanced degree. He can read structural engineering drawings that look like abstract art to me. But intelligence without a certain kind of watchfulness, without the willingness to ask uncomfortable questions of people you love, can leave you exposed in ways you don't see coming. That's not a character flaw. It's a gap that most of us have because we're taught that trust is a virtue and suspicion is unkind. And trust is a virtue, but it has to live alongside attention. You can love someone and still notice when something doesn't add up. Those two things are not in conflict. Lionel is learning that now. He checks his accounts every week. He reads what he signs. He asks questions even when it feels awkward. That's not cynicism, that's self-respect. There's a difference, and the difference matters. As for what it takes to come back from something like this, I watched my son wake up at 5:30 every morning for 3 months and go to work when he had every reason to collapse. I watched him hold it together on video calls with an 18-month-old who didn't know why her dad wasn't there. I watched him sit in the dark at 2 in the morning and still get up the next day. That kind of endurance is not something you can teach in a classroom. It lives in a person, or it doesn't. In Lionel, it was always there. This just made it visible. I think that's what difficult things do when you survive them. They don't build character from scratch. They reveal what was already there. I'm 63 years old and I'm not sure I knew, before all of this, exactly what kind of man my son is. I know now, in Nora, she's going to grow up knowing that when things fell apart, the people who loved her did not stop moving forward. That's the only inheritance that actually matters. Not the house, not the money. The example.